Hi and welcome to the new format of 2 pints of maggots and a packet of hooks, the fishing podcast. As always, we will stick to our structure of the press pack and the tackle shed, but replacing the big chat feature which we've had since the very start of our podcast series is something new, which is called the forum. And I'm hoping that this will bring a different angle, a different element to the podcast, where we're going to have a bunch of guests chatting amongst themselves, chewing the fat, if you like, and talking about lots of different subjects throughout angling. Now, in this episode, it's a real special one because we bring back angling media royalty in the form of Keith Arthur. He is still the number one most listened to episode out of all the podcasts. So episode 1, series 1, he's still way ahead above everybody else in terms of listens. So we had to get him back because the theme, or the subject, if you like, is all about angling media in the forum. Not only Keith, but we've got Alex Dockerty from Lindholm Fisheries, former Golden Rod winner. And of course, we've got Tony. I'm not even going to attempt his second name. You can tell you that later on. But Tony is the features editor from Improve Your Coarse Fishing. So lots and lots of chat going to take place about the evolution of the information that we take on board when it comes to fishing and the fishing media. So sit back, relax, have a little listen to 2 pints of maggots and a packet of hooks, the fishing podcast. Diving straight into the press pack, and I don't really know where to start because it's been just over a month since we had our last episode of the podcast, and there seems to be a cacophony of information out there and news stories and new tackle launches, etc. So bit of a tough one. So let's keep this nice and simple and keep to the printed press. First of all, Angling Times. We'll stick to this month, May the 3rd. A couple of things that caught my eye. The first one would be, in terms of catches, a 41-pound, 15-ounce pike from Chew Valley Reservoir. And this was brought to the bank by former international fly angler Ben Bangham. And he does this a couple of times a year, apparently, at this time of the year as well. He fishes a 10-weight rod, which is beefed up for predators, and uses a specific fly. And according to his catch report, if you like, he saw this fish following his fly in the retrieve, and he thought it was a 20-pounder. Once it engulfed the fly and he'd hooked it and the fight was on, he saw the fish froze. Oh, it's 30. Well, little did he know, of course, when he weighed it, it went over 40 pounds. So an unbelievable catch, really. As I say, Chew Valley Reservoir, and it seems at this time of the year, the pike, after they finish their spawning and whatnot, become pretty active once again. Imagine that pike sort of 6 months ago when they were really on the feed, ready for spawning. That could have been way more than what it weighed already. So well done to Ben. That was brilliant. Another thing worth noting, it happens every year. A lot of focus on it this year as well, now that restrictions, if you like, are back to normal. National Fishing Month. So that will come this August, so it correlates with the school holidays. Loads of events taking place from various charities and the Angling Trust. So check it out at www.nationalfishingmonth.com. A big theme throughout the magazine last week as well was tench, and absolutely, as soon as spring ticks it over, you think that May things start warming up, and you automatically think tench. Tench are by far my favourite fish. I just don't get to catch them enough. There's not a great deal of them in a lot of commercial waters, matches, etc. Certainly not in rivers, which are focused on in sort of autumn and winter. There is a lot around the drains in my area, which I've not really had a chance to attack just yet. So hopefully that could be something this year. And I've got my eye on a couple of relatively untouched or low fished, if you like, venues close by, which I do believe hold tench. So it's just a case of trying to find time. But in there, there is a list of, in Angling Times, there's a list of 10 top venues to target all over the country. Loads of tips and tricks, loads of articles and features. There's one in there about what would be the ultimate rig for a tench, and they highlight like a helicopter style rig with a little foam pop up with maggots on the hook. So that's in there. How to pre-bait, what ground bait mixes. So yeah, May really does equal like a tench month, I guess. And as I say, by far my favourite fish. Just don't catch enough of them. Need to make time. Match-wise, it was advertised, of course, Drennan Barnsley Backs had won the Commercial National at Lindholm Lakes. No surprise there. Really solid performers in that neck of the woods. But it's not just the fact that, Lindholm is pretty much a home water for a lot of them anglers, but actually they've backed it up more than that. This is their third title this year already, with a Winter League success and also the Census Challenge, which is a completely different way of fishing, of course. Census Challenge, usually on the Gloucester Canal, that involves a lot of bloodworm joker fishing, international style fishing if you want. So what this squad is showing now is complete versatility. They're really dominating the domestic team fishing scene for sure. And the question is, who's going to step up to the plate and beat them? The likes of the, Daiwa Dawkins of this world that used to be their main challengers and Starlets, etc. They, that's, it seems that Barnsley are pulling away from all those guys. So well done to them, 100%. And Ollie Scott-Horn was also the individual winner. So it was a bit of a double header for Barnsley at the Commercial National. Speaking of match fishing as well, our good old mate, Tommy Pickering, he has just been included into a new team that's been created for a new event called the Masters Feeder Team. They'll be heading out to Spain in September on the Guadiar River in Merida. The team will consist of a couple of former guests, actually. We've got Tom Pickering and Darren Cox, as well as Simon Fry, Andrew Moss and Richard Vaughan. So good luck to the chaps. I know how important fishing for his country is for Tommy Pickering, and I'm sure Darren as well will be more than happy to get his 3 lines back on his chest. So an interesting event, feeder only over 2 days, international style, of course. And with Tom being the ex-feeder manager, he'll captain the team, and I'm sure they'll do very, very well out there. We wish them all the best. On to this week's Angling Times. Where are my notes? I made a couple of notes on this because there was one fish, and it was a rudd. A guy called Ben Taplin attacked a gravel pit with like a worm and corn hook bait. They pre-baited a couple of areas, and this 2 pound 12 ounce rudd came to the bank. He was targeting them, and that's the theme of this week's magazine. So last week was tench, this week it's more about rudd, and you think you put those two species together and they really do encapsulate spring and summer, don't they? Seeing the rudd feed on the surface and the tench scrubbing around on the bottom, seeing little bubbles popping up all across the lake next to lily pads, etc. So yeah, a really interesting magazine for that species this week, because lots of tips, lots of tricks once again. So tench last week, rudd this week. Another little article, check out Arthur's Archives, our good mate Keith Arthur, who is part of the forum on this very show. He talks about the history of the method feeder beginning in 1982 by two chaps fishing a very, very silty lake in Kent, and how can they overcome that? He took a feeder and it sinks straight into the silt. You throw some balls of ground bait in, straight into the silt. So how can they catch these bream? And that's where the M-Stat feeder was created and then adapted by Andy Finley down the line to what we have today in its many, many forms, but the same principle. So that's Angling Times. Let's have a little look at the monthlies. Firstly, Improve Your Coarse Fishing for this month. So it is edition, let me get this right, 389 from May the 3rd to June the 7th. A couple of good articles kicking off straight away. Nice features with Loughborough Canal for a start, Grand Union Canal, Loughborough. Now, I've never fished this stretch, but my old mate Scott Johnson, who runs Saw Tackle, this is his neck of the woods, and I know he rates this canal in this area very highly, and that is demonstrated by a stunning net of perch by a chap called Tom Boyce. Really nice net of fish on the Grand Union Canal. Never fished it myself, but like I say, I know people that do rate it. Then you've got young lady Lottie Wotton. She's been in the magazines a few times, up and coming rising star, catching bream, Baden Hall. But the one that caught my eye, the main one, with an ironic catching of the eye, is, let me get the page 35. Chap called Chris Ponsford, top all-rounder, proves that you don't need to break the bank or haul a mountain of tackle for a memorable day out. Now, he's at Docklow Pools and he's on the Mickey Mouse Lake, and I'm looking at that image. It's page 35, with a twisted irony, because in the background is a bridge that spans between the two lakes that link up there. And those who listen regular to this show will know that I'm a massive fan of Docklow Pools. I've just not been back for a few years because I've got the little one and to stay there, it's an adults only. So just not a chance to get there. But that bridge on page 34 is where I slipped and broke my ankle in 3 places. So every time I see that, it's got a bittersweet memory. The point is, in terms of this feature, a simple waggler setup, feeding casters on this like Mickey Mouse, it's a brilliant mixed water anyway. You're going to catch chub, tench, just talking about perch, eyed cap, all sorts at Docklow on the Mickey. So if you fancy a spot of silverfish sport, or actually, let's call it mixed bag sport, certainly Docklow is one of those venues that, you know, every time the float goes under, you don't know what it's going to be. So I read that with a sort of a bit of an uncomfortable feel when I saw that bridge. But the venue holds so many memories for me, and that type of fishing is brilliant. Just a waggler with casters, seeing what drags that float underneath, using simple tactics. So yes, that is Docklow Pools on page 35. Page 47, another Northwest fellow angler chap. Fished against him many times, Gareth Gibbons. He's fishing at a lovely venue. I think I've spoke about this before. Big fan. When I lived in the Northwest, didn't really fish it as much as I should have done, to be honest. Called Old Huff. Long story short, he's just fishing with one tin of corn and see what props along, saying that, you know, a couple of grains of corn, you don't need to feed loads and loads of bait, etc., etc. And Old Huff is a really, really nice venue, I have to say. And Gaz talks about, you know, he's set up there and fishing nice and simple. So that is well worth a read as well. And then finally, on page 92, a lovely story, The Adventures of a Fishing Family. So there was a competition last year in the magazine to find Search for a Star. And it was in conjunction with Shakespeare Tackle, classic brand. I think everybody growing up probably had either one of those blue Shakespeare boxes or an item of tackle for Shakespeare. Well, they have evolved over time, and they're bringing a lot of tackle to try and get people into the sport, and of course different genres as well. They do some specimen kit as well, and some beginner starter kits, and I'll talk through them in the tackle shed. But this piece, who won the competition? Dad Stu, Mum Megan, their 2 sons Cosmo and Milo, 14 and 9, and they go out fishing together. Variety of venues, variety of species. They're catching a bit of all sorts: little perch, little roach, some bonus bream, nice roach, nice perch for Dad, bit of everything. So that is a nice feature that will continue running. I look forward to reading their escapades. You know, think about that, taking the family out fishing and all involved. What a great way to do things, rather than sat at home and, you know, kids are on the PlayStation, and getting out, getting the fresh air and catching some fish. So that's Improve Your Course Fishing. Now, match fishing this month, I must admit, I've not had chance to digest it all. It was a little bit late onto my doorstep, but there is one thing that stands out straight away, which I was headed to immediately, and that was to page 26. He's on the front cover as well. Page 26, it's Bob Nudd at 78. And there's a full interview in here regarding his involvement with the England veterans team, etc., etc. And do you know what? It's just, Bob Nudd for me is a bit of an icon. I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3. This is over sort of an 8-page spread, and rightly so. Still active, still fishing, still catching lots of fish, still on the Irish scene as well. It's, you know, representing England and the veteran scene. Bob Nudd to me is a legend. As a kid growing up, those DVDs, those tips and tricks of just simple things like tying knots and simple feeding presentation, his style of delivery on those early videos, and that sort of leads me into the section for the forum. It was his inspirational videos, him and Keith Arthur, when I was a youngster, that really got me the bug, if you like, certainly for match fishing, that is for sure. And what a wonderful read when he talks about, you know, when he won that World Championship in '94 on home soil, and it's all in there. It's well worth the read. You just, you know, it's Bob Nudd. Now, I have tried to get Bob onto the podcast, but alas, I haven't been successful. But if you do have a listen, Bob, then you are more than welcome anytime. That is for sure. Now, next page 34, our good mate Alex Dockerty. Again, he's in the forum, coming up very, very soon. And he actually alludes to some of these tactics that he's used in the past. Feeding a method in the margins. He's at Lindholm, of course. He's home water, if you like. He's an absolute expert. Some brilliant tips for fishing that rod down the edge. And a lot of this is born out of the feeder league that happens there every Tuesday. And actually, at the back of that, Shimano will be launching a new event this year by Nick Speed, which will have a feeder league that goes around different venues, culminates in a final. I think it's around October time at Lindholm. So this feeder league, it was feeder and bomb league, you can use two tactics, is really caught the imagination, working really well, and is now growing a wee bit. And Alex talks about this because when you're fishing those, they're normally on a Tuesday, you can't get your waggler rod, your pole, etc. You've got to fish a rod and line. And, of course, you want to fish down the edge, you've got to adapt your method or your hybrid feed or whatever. That's what he talks about in this section here. So, again, well worth a read. It gets you thinking of how to approach your margins slightly differently. So take a look. Loads of stuff going on. New events, new target species, as the weather changes. Some good catches in the weekly media. So, yeah, take a look. But that's it for the press pack. The next section is brand new, and it's called The Forum.
Teddy Fisher Baits specialise in the manufacture of fishing ground bait and additives. We combine a 40-year-old proven fish catching recipe and the experience of our skilled team. Fishing is an adventure, and here at Teddy Fisher, we strive to make that adventure a success. Go to www.teddyfisher.co.uk to see our full range of baits.
Hello and welcome to the new segment of the podcast. The new section, as I said in my monologue to this episode, is called The Forum. And the idea behind it is we're going to bring together some top anglers to discuss different subjects and offer various opinions. So for this very first forum, the topic, amongst other things I'm sure, will focus on the angling media. That is the focus of this very, very first forum. And we've got a treat in store in terms of our three guests, because firstly, and no introduction is needed whatsoever, he is angling media royalty for sure. He's still number one in terms of listeners for the podcast. Series 1, Episode 1, Mr. Keith Arthur. How are you, sir?
I'm pretty good, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm bearing up under all the strains.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The aches and strains, I'm sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, welcome back, Keith. And I'm sure you'll have lots to contribute on this one. Second, we have at the opposite end of the vintage spectrum, I'm sure Keith won't mind me saying, is the young un. It's Mr. Alex Dockerty, of course, a former Golden Rod winner and the expert and coach at Lindholm Fisheries. Alex, how are you, lad?
I'm good, mate. How are you? Keeping well?
I am very well, mate. So you're more than welcome back to the podcast. And last but not least, a new guest for the podcast. And I'm not even going to attempt to say his surname because you're going to do this for me, Tony. But features editor, Improve Your Coarse Fishing magazine. I talk about it every single episode in the press pack. And we're going to get to the crux of talking about the printed press and the printed media. But it's Tony G. Now, that sounds like a second-rate DJ. So, Tony, tell us all your second name.
Surname, Tony Grigorjevs, which looks like Grigorjevs, but its Latvian roots make it Grigorjevs. So, yeah, it's a good name for getting rid of the cold callers, that is, mate, when they get printed.
Well, I'd rather you introduce yourself than I do, mate. That is for sure. But you're going to be instrumental in this episode, that is for sure, because you're there, you're at the coalface, if you like. You're out and about daily, doing features, doing editorials, and give us a real insight. But I think as part of the topic, I want to kick off with yourself, Keith, because you've seen a lot, right? You were at the forefront of angling media for so many, many years. And now in Angling Times on a weekly basis, you are the local historian, I guess to say, is Harper's Archives. Cast your mind back and have a little think back to when you was a youngster, if you like. How did you consume any sort of angling media per se? Was it all just passed down word of mouth, shown on the bank? Was there any instructional magazines or anything whatsoever? How did it start when you was a youngster?
Well, when I was a proper youngster, the angling media was Mr. Crabtree Goes Fishing.
Yes.
That came out when I was 5 or 6. Angling Time started when I was 7. And it was, 7. And I think it's 70 next year. I think it started in 53, and the first editor was Bernard Venables.
Who was Mr. Crabtree, of course.
Who designed Mr. Crabtree. And when the Daily Mirror said to him, we better have a fishing feature because you do gardening at the minute, and Mr. Crabtree was a gardener who dug up some worms and took them fishing, and Mr. Crabtree Goes Fishing was born. And that's a bit of a précis, but there wasn't really any angling media. The Angling Times proudly had on the back, printed in Britain as a newspaper, or printed in England as a newspaper, so it could be posted cheaper than a magazine because it was actually a newspaper. It came out every week, and it had the news in. And I mean, I probably didn't buy Angling Times till I was properly into match fishing, which would have been the late 1960s, early 1970s, really. And then the Angling Times was a must-have, because if you wanted to fish a match, you had to look in the Angling Times to get the details where to book it from. You quite often had to write in for tickets to the person that was advertising the match, and you had to book a couple of weeks in advance, and you got the info about what it was fishing like by the matches that had been fished there the previous weekend or the previous time you'd remembered from the paper, because there weren't very many matches then. And in London, we had sort of the London Anglers matches, and that was all we went on, because basically the rules of the LAA were so restrictive in those days. They were all we could go on, because we had to fish wherever we went, anywhere in the world, to London Anglers Association size limits.
Yes.
So angling media, when I started, there was Mr. Crabtree, and then when I was old enough, there was Angling Times, and then Anglers Mail came along, and most people bought both newspapers, as they were then, both weeks.
Yes. So at the opposite end of that, if I talk to Alex and ask a similar question, much younger chap, growing up in a social media age, I guess, you had some great anglers. We went through this on your podcast, the likes of Tom Pickering and Nick Speed, etc., who sort of took you under the wing on the bank, and you learned that way. But was there anything that perked your interest early doors? Do you remember getting that first DVD? I always remember when I was a youngster, it was like, I got like a Bob Nudd DVD for my birthday, and it was like the best thing ever. How did it, catch your eye, Alex, when you was growing up?
In terms of media, for me, it's probably the same sort of thing as you. I remember my mum buying me a little DVD, Calf and Tench on the long pole with Bob Nudd. Then it's the usual sort of things, you wandering around the supermarket, tagging on your mum's arm, I have this fishing magazine, like you used to get like an odd free float and things, didn't you, with Angling Times things, like, and you as a kid, you always think, oh, I want that float, but then you'd have a flick through, you'd see like Steve Ringer, Will Rays, and people like that, and obviously you aspire to that, so you sort of hold them people in highlight, and you read it back to back and wear it out. But that was more of the very early days for me, and obviously, hopefully, what we're going to discuss tonight, how it's changed, and we've sort of moved into that technological era. But yeah, those early days, it was all about sort of improving coarse fishing. I think I remember having an advanced pole fishing magazine. I think that was about the earliest one before it changed to, obviously, pole fishing and match fishing.
Yes, exactly. Well, what about yourself, Tone?
I mean, my sort of, the way I got into fishing in a weird way, I mean, we went on holiday as a family once, and we were abroad, and I being a curious kid, playing around in the sea, I kept finding dead sardines. I kept bringing them back to my mum and dad in a bucket, and they were like, "He's obsessed with this. We need to take him fishing, like properly fishing." So we ended up down place you'll obviously know, being a fellow Alderman, Dave, Alexandra Park Lake.
Yeah, oh yes, he knows it well too.
Even I know that. Yeah.
Yes, it's quite a famous little lake. Telescopic rod, the stereotypical curling line, horrific tackle, and got a little bit lucky in terms of what we caught. And then from then on, it's sort of like anything in the media was, I didn't really have a loyalty. It was kind of, I did read magazines. It was anything from Angling Times, Anglers Mail, say Improve, just sort of picked up different magazines and sort of, I've still got big piles of them at home. I say I never really had a loyalty to any in particular, but I was always reading through things, just looking at the big fish, really, to be honest with you. Like I say, I started when I was, 6 or 7. So yeah, that's really what went for me.
And you guys would have had lots of choice, unlike, like he's saying, there was very little about at the time. Yourself, Alex, would have had, you could have picked up a plethora of content. And the reason why I've chosen this subject for this first forum is because on the last few episodes, I've had this section called the archives, where I've actually, just like you said there, Tony, I've got tons and tons of old material that I've kept. It's in the attic. And I just pull one out, a match fishing magazine from 1994 with, Dave Vincent on the front or whatever. And it's just about flicking through what were the prices like of tackle back then? What could you get for your money? Have the techniques and tactics changed that much? Probably not. So what I've been doing, my own personal journey this last 6 months or so, is looking at the content. And I found the way things have evolved really, really interesting, because the reality is the tactics and techniques haven't changed. The venues have, the types of fish that we fish for have, but in general, the principles of catching fish are still the same. And my magazines go right the way back to, I think, 91. So that was why I wanted to talk about the angling media.
Sorry, I'm giggling, mate. I've got a box of magazines that someone sent me here. They sent me 4 annuals of fishing magazine. So I just thought I'd get one out. This is quite late. This is the latest one of the 4. This is June 1964, and I thought I'd get it out. And while you were saying it, you mentioned similar types of fishing.
What could you get for your money then, Keith?
Well, I've just opened a page with an advert that says "Introducing the Swim Light." Miller, this is Millwards or Millard brothers they become, were one of the pioneers of hollow-built split cane, and for many years have been using this form of construction, which gives extreme lightness, balance, and controlled action. In the past, this is advertising copy, by the way. In the past, rods of this sort of necessity been expensive. Now, a new process, in 4 lots of inverted commas, enables us to offer a hollow-built match rod for as little as £8 3 and 4 pence. Which is about £8.16p. The swim light's 12 foot long, and although designed as a match rod, still plenty of action to cast a float a long way, or handle a big fish. And that was £7 plus £1 3 and 4 pence purchase tax. So I don't think VAT's new. It was just called something different, and that was a pretty top of the line rod then. That was been handmade built cane. And
what would that be in today's money?
Oh, how do you mean? What, working on the increments of how much it had gone up over the years?
Well, you say £7 in 1960. That sounds a lot of money then.
Well, I started work. This is 1964, as I said, July 1964, June 1964. I started work in September 1963 for £4.50 a week.
So you're talking 2 weeks' wages for a top end match rod.
When I first left school, 2 weeks' wages for a top-end match rod, and that rod, although you're not comparing apples with apples, if you compare it to something like a Diver Ninja, is, if you want a top-of-the-line match rod these days, it's going to cost you best part of 2 weeks' wages, because you're looking at something top of the tree from Diver, maybe TriCast. There's not many people, or Guru, which are made by Diver anyway, or were. It's not that much difference in price, really. I suppose if you're earning, I don't know, 25 grand a year now, 500 quid a week, it's not going to cost you a long one, is it? So no, tackle is miles cheaper. But what I was giggling about first of all was DVDs. I made my first video in 1989, and Tight Line started in 1995, and that is like ancient history for you.
In theory, yeah. Well, it is and it isn't, because of course that first series of Tight Lines was, special to me, because obviously that's when we first saw on that. So I was consuming that type of live media then, mid 90s, and VHS wise, DVD. Yeah, you're right. Probably I didn't start fishing until I was 8, so that was 88. So 89, 90 would have been VHS.
Yeah,
so, you're right. Let's talk, Tony. In Preview Course Fishing, we'll get into the whole social media and all the rest of it as we go through, like Alex alluded to. But in Preview Course Fishing, still incredibly popular. I know we had a chat recently, still over 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah, I'm not sure the actual figures at the moment, but I mean, the pandemic, like most print media did, the pandemic was obviously an awful thing, but we benefited from it massively. Everyone sat at home, nothing to do, subscribe to a magazine.
Yeah.
And it benefited. And, yes, we lost a few of those. It's inevitable when people will go back to real life, but we still have more subscribers now than we did before the pandemic started. Let's say fishing's picked up more anglers without a doubt. Yes, we'll have lost some back that we gained, but I would still say the net value, the amount of anglers out there now must be more than was in 2019. Certainly feels like it when I'm out on the bank. Going out on obscure days like a Monday or a Tuesday, and there's 10, 15 people on a lake in not great conditions. You're like, well, I don't know if Alex sees that as well.
Has that ring true for Alex at Lindor?
Yeah, I definitely see that every day. We're a lot busier than we have been, but the great thing is we've got a range of people as well. Lots of dads and lads, lots of older people, and what we've seen is a lot of lads sort of 30s, 40s who did a little bit with a granddad or a dad as a kid, got a career, got a wife, kids, and we've got what the pandemic did was give them that chance to get back into fishing, and there's a lot of them who's stuck at it.
And they could be your new subscribers, Tony. They could have been the likes that have picked up that, subscription package and sort of ran with it. Question for each of you, though. And Tony, this is a belter for you. What makes a good feature?
What makes a good feature? Oh, that's a good question. I think it's got to have all-round appeal. I think you've got to write something that, if you're on a venue in Devon, you've got to make it appeal to someone who lives near Alex. You say whether it ends up being of tactical interest to you or just interest, you pick it up and think, oh, well, that's just makes you thumb through. That's the big thing. I think you've got to have wide appeal. You can't just have a feature which is going to appeal to someone who lives within, say, a 10-mile radius of a venue, or someone that could, do a particular tactic. If we did something, let's say, example, long-range casting, you'd have to make it interesting because, let's be fair, most people these days are shooting 30 yards with a little method or similar. Anything, the long-range feeder fishing, yes, it exists, but it's more niche. So if you do it, you've got to make it more interesting. So it's got to be as interesting to the newcomer as it is to the experienced angler, and have that widespread appeal so that when they get into the thick of the magazine, they're not just getting to a feature and going, nah, that ain't for me, I'll carry on. Because if you have too many of them features in the magazine, before you know it, you've got to the back, you look at the price and you think, well, I haven't had my money's worth for that. So that's what I try and achieve with every feature I try and put out there.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because the printed press is the one, as Keith highlighted, has been around the longest time since the 50s and 60s with Angling Times, etc. So moving on a little bit with obviously the not quite social media yet, but let's think about recorded media, so VHS, DVDs. Keith, you was involved with hundreds of them. You produced X amount of Tight Lines episodes as well. What makes a good program on TV?
Mortimer and Whitehouse seem to have found the exact right key, because it not only attracts most anglers, not all, some people think it's a load of crap, but they have no concept of what entertainment is on television, to be honest, because it is extraordinarily entertaining, and it came about at the right time for angling with the coronavirus restrictions and lockdown and everything, and made people yearn to be outside at a time when that was all they could do. And I think that had as much to do with the uptake of angling as anything else, because I think it was an absolutely brilliant program. And only in a very overt way did it teach anyone how to fish.
Yes, I know. No instruction.
What it did, it taught them why they wanted to fish. And that, just to say to go on to what Tony's just said about the features in magazines, first of all, they've got to make you want to fish. And then when you want to fish, you want to cast a feeder a long way, or you want to fish a slider, or you want to be able to catch fish shallow on the pole. So but everything comes from what makes you want to fish. And the first few videos I did, there were a couple on Loch Earn in Ireland and around the Lakelands. But then we did the fishing from the beginning. where I took a young lad who was 12 at the time, took him fishing right from the very beginning. And it was funny because we set him up on a bit of canal at Milton Keynes with a size 12 hook and a worm that we dug out the garden. And he wouldn't stop catching bleeding perch when I'm trying to show him how you should be fishing a pinky down the middle and, that kind of thing. And, no, look, just don't put a worm on this cast because you're catching them quicker than I am on the waggler. So, yeah, but what we tried to do there was encourage people to go fishing. Very interesting what Alex was saying about people turning up at the fishery, especially dads and lads. And a little clue to what we do at Get Hooked on Fishing, Alex, we try and attract the mums and lads because 9 times out of 10, when Johnny's on holiday from school, it's mum will have to take him fishing.
Yeah.
And it's great that you've got a great calf, you've got nice toilets. It attracts mums, and mums are the real people that you want to attract because they're the ones that will bring kids. And we get, when we do our family fishing days, we get almost as many girls want to have a go as boys. And we really get the mums involved and interested. Dads come as well, and dads always want to fish, and dads know how to do it better than everybody. But if you can get the mums involved and just get the little girls touching fish and playing with a maggot or whatever. But yeah, the recorded media is probably even more difficult than the print, because on print you can just skirt to the page you want, whereas you've got to make a video, a DVD, interesting, because you've really got to watch it from beginning to end. You can't just flick on. You can do it these days with DVDs if they're constructed like that. Now go to 1547 or whatever it is. Yeah. But doing it, doing a DVD, it's or a recorded program. Even Tight Lines was quite easy because we basically wanted to make a 7-minute film. And 7 minutes is great. Everybody can pay attention for 7 minutes. But when you start getting to an hour, that's really, really difficult to keep people entertained. Really difficult.
And the question to you, Alex, this is, I guess, how important are features and media to the fishery? Because Lindholm has got a massive name anyway. You almost feel that you don't need to do a feature. It's like we and Tony discussed it. We was talking about feature ages ago, weren't we? And I said, oh, well, why don't we pop up to go and have a go on bonsai because it's brand new. And you was like, it's already been done. You just like Lindholm, it just rolls off the tongue. So do you need it? Do you need people to make videos? Do you still need features there? What's the benefit nowadays?
It's massive because the minute you take your foot off the gas, and this is purely as sort of a business perspective, which, as everyone will probably know, media in business is massive because that's how you sell your product, your service, whatever, to the public. So the minute you ease off with that presence, people will start talking about X venue, Y venue, X product, and so on. So for me, especially like sort of the younger generation, say that attractiveness towards them to get them used to say, oh, I want to go to Lindholm. That's where I've seen, I don't know, Jamie Hughes fishing shallow with maggots. I've seen Speedy chucking a feeder to an island. I've seen Tommy, blah, blah. You want that association with that because that's what generates your custom.
Got it.
The minute they're hearing about somewhere else or this, that, and the other, automatically that's where they're going to be headed because that's the direction they're pointed. That's where the limelight is in their mindset. I think I saw one of the Guru things what William spoke about the England and how Fishermania, Match This, and so on, because that's the focus for the media and the press. That's what my sort of age group's driven to, and you can relate that to anything really. Anything that gets coverage, people will aspire to.
And on the flip side, I mean, the chaps have just said there, Tony, printed press good feature. Keith, what do we need for a recorded feature? Well, as an angler that features in features, if you like, as a sponsored angler, obviously you've got to represent your sponsors, Drennan, Dynamite Baits. What do you like to bring to a feature as the angler?
For me, I suppose it's all your personal opinion with it, but for me, I'd like to provide information, provide sort of a spin on a subject, which is sort of my take on things. There's no there's no point me sitting down and trying to write as though I'm Jamie Hughes, Andy Bennett, whoever, because it's not genuine then. I think whatever you write and whatever you publish has to be genuine in your own thoughts, because then that'll bring integrity to what you do, and then people will get on board with that.
Yes,
absolutely. That you couldn't be more right there, Alec. It's no good trying to be someone you're not, and you will put a completely different spin on things because, if I ever wrote an instructional book about fishing, which I have no intention of doing, it would be called The Imperfect Science, because there's no doubt that fishing is scientific, but there are very, very, very few facts.
I always try and get across to people when people say, if we said, let's pick margin fishing, people say, well, that's been done. Well, if we were all to do a margin feature, all four of us, and we were all to write down how we did it and what we did, every single one would be different. And we would all maybe have 10 minor changes. And we all know that in fishing, there isn't magic tactics. It's all them tiny little things. If we all sat down next to each other fishing down the margins, from the naked eye, just looking at it, it would look the same. And then if you went and dissected everything, we would do so many bits and pieces, different shotting, different hooks, different feeding. And that is what ultimately can separate someone who's, a pleasure angler from someone who's an elite. And it's not that magic bait, it's not that magic tactic. It's those maybe 10, 20 little things that you do that are different that end up, send you to a different level. And that's the thing. Like I say, you just see so many. Everybody has a different way of doing things. And if I was to do a margin feature now at Lindholm with Alex, and then I was to do it with Speedy next month, you get a totally different flavour because there's two different anglers, both very successful, both very knowledgeable, but have their own ways of doing it. Because as Keith rightly said, there is no science, there is no perfect science to it, so to speak.
Do you think that when you do those kind of features, what I tried to do on Tight Lines, and when I was doing instructional stuff with Angling Times, God knows how many years ago, best part of 30 years ago, with Michelle Daniel and then Kev Green, what I tried to do was you can't tell somebody what to do for 5 hours of a match or 2 hours of a pleasure session or anything. You can't do it minute by minute. So what I always tried to do was to inspire people to think about what they were doing. And I've used a phrase for years, and I first started using it in my own head when I was driving home from fishing matches. And it was, did I do well or did I do badly because of or in spite of? Did I win because I fed a gallon of bronze maggots or in spite of feeding a gallon of bronze maggots? Could I have won with 2 pints? Yeah. If I'd have fed 2 gallons, would I have caught more? And I wouldn't feed 2 gallons, I wouldn't take them. But you know what I mean? It's that because of or in spite of. I think if you can get that into somebody's mind and get him thinking why. I mean, somebody's enrolled me in a Facebook group I went to. It's good. It's very, very basic anglers. And one bloke said he was thinking of today that he's read so much on there about small pellets. He was thinking about going out and fishing with 2 mil pellets, and would he do any good? So people were saying, well, I use 8 mil pellets. Sweet corn and spam's better, and maggots are better than that. And what I said is, how are you going to hook it? Good luck getting a 2 mil pellet into a pellet band.
Yeah.
And somebody said, I've got a tool to do it. And I've got a tool to do it as well. But the tool's much bigger than 2 mil. Yeah. And that was what it was. He was thinking along the wrong lines because the information he got on there was very, very basic about people saying, I used 2 mil pellets, and didn't say they moulded them around a feeder or cut them in or made them into a ball and chucked them in. He wanted to use 2 mil pellets because he'd read on this Facebook group, lots of people had caught on 2 mil pellets. It had got him thinking, but he'd thought down the wrong line. And I didn't just say that, obviously. I said, this is what they're for. But trying to explain to people, and when you get some places where literally, and I hate to say this, where the blind lead the blind, where you've got people that not only are not experts, they're not even very, very basically competent anglers telling somebody else how to do it because they've read about it in Improve Your Coarse Fishing or whatever, or they've read it on another Facebook page. Try this. Oh, this is so. So you've got to be very. There's as much misinformation out there about angling as there is about flipping COVID vaccinations.
Well, that is a big a big note in my notes, which we'll get to later on. Well, I might as well address it now, actually. My question was for all of you. This is on my bits of paper, just to prove that I do some research.
Absolutely.
The question was just bits, yeah.
Must be small bits.
It's in shorthand. The question was, I mean, any numpty like myself has got a phone and can start shooting and filming and bits and pieces, and there's that much stuff out there. My question was this was going to be our very last question. We'll throw it out there now. Is there too much information, especially with social media out there? So yeah, I mean, wow, chat amongst yourselves. That was my my final question, but we can address it now. Tony, I mean, you kick off with that because printed press, we spoke last week when we did some bits and pieces about how we was looking at Instagram and the algorithms and all that sort of. We could have talked about that for hours. So yeah.
No, I don't think there is. I think what Keith rightly said. I think we need. I think the media on the whole, the angling media, whether it's us doing magazines, whether it's tackle companies doing stuff online, we need to give people the platform, the real basics, to sit down and learn how to catch a few fish. Because I think once you start to do that and you get the confidence to do that, you then naturally advance. Let's say you start catching a few fish, and let's say you're at Lindholm. You catch a few fish, you're really happy with your results. You speak to Alex, and Alex will go, all right, next time, try this. And that's the way you need to advance. And I said there's no right or wrong. I mean, all of us, fishing is constantly evolving in the sense of one thing that we may have been doing 6 months ago has now changed, and it changes by the venue. I don't think you can have too much information out there. I think we need to get people getting the basics right. I think that's really important. But from then, we need to stimulate, like you said, that thought process in the mind, right? I said, what should I do? Trial and error, because a lot of the time that is what fishing's about. So no, I don't think you can have too much. It has to be genuine information. It has to be stuff that's proven to work. But as long as it's information that's valid and has worked and does work, then I don't think there can be too much. No, that's what I think.
Well, Alex, what about you must have some stories from Lindholm where exactly what Keith just pointed out. You've somebody's read something, these Chinese whispers, something's got lost, somebody's doing something completely wrong, and you're just like, I wish you'd have asked, and you would have put them right. Do you get that, or do you find that people in general are asking good questions and have good ideas?
A lot of the time, yeah, people are quite clued up, but the fundamental issue with fishing, we can't see the objects of what we're fishing for. All we have is our best guess into the best time. And say the problem with fishing, you can go down the wrong road and still catch fish. Unlike golf, say you're playing golf. If you're doing it wrong, you're going further away from the hole. Fishing, you can still catch fish, have a good day, because, like Keith was saying, it's that imperfect science. But generally, the sort of angle we get at Lindholm, it's with it being predominantly a match venue, is sort of club to open match level anglers. So you get a lot of questions like, oh, is it pellets or casters? Should I be, what ground bait mix for the edge? So on and so on. But with the pleasure anglers, especially the last few years with a lot of new startups, you do get a lot of very basic questions. And what are the danger of social media, or at the minute, because I see a lot of it with work and things, people are so keen to shoot someone down. If I was a newcomer to, I don't know, say I went, playing golf and I wanted to know what club for this, I would be scared to death to ask because I'd be worried of making myself look daft. So I think we're sometimes our own worst enemies in the sense that we want to encourage people into the sport, ask questions. But if you've not seen that before and you ask what's considered a daft question, you create problems. You get shot down. You think, oh, I'm going to stay away from that. So it's a tough one in terms of how to ask the question, and asking the question in the right place or to the right people will get you a very different answer. But I suppose it all depends on your source of information. If you get a good source of information, as with any sort of research, any sort of learning, your outcome will be better. Rather than if you ask I don't know, Fred Bloggs, who's made himself a Facebook account and saying X, Y, Z. Is it reputable? Is it a trustworthy source? And I think if you think about your fishing and who you ask in that sense, you're going to go down the right path a lot quicker than someone who's asking a group with 10,000 members and anyone can sort of bombard you with information, because you've then got to sift through the information.
What do you mean by, it's interesting what you just said about being shot down. What have you seen examples of that online?
No, say someone will say, I don't know, oh, I've started this and this is an example of my rig. You go, oh, what are you using that for? Your plant pot and blah, blah, blah.
Got you.
You think, well, no, educate that person, make him feel comfortable and so he can ask questions, and then he'll progress into a sport, and then you don't know, you might create a new angler, you know, he might come back. It might, like, going back to the fishery side of things, that's, you know, it's repeat business for you. Like, for instance, obviously going off topic a little bit with the learning thing, I put a post on the other day about litter around the fishery, please pick it up, blah, blah, blah.
Send that, yeah.
And I think there's about like 70, 80 comments all saying, you need to do this, you should be doing this as a business, you should be doing that.
Yeah.
Why don't
there more litter bins?
Yeah,
why don't you go around and pick it up more regularly?
Exactly. You're like, well, that's not the point. Like, if he doesn't drop that, it's not an issue. You can spin anything any which way on media and hide behind a profile, and that's, I think we need to, I don't know whether you vet the people. Like, we've made a lot of our Lindome groups closed groups, so we control who's in and out. You know, because, you know, kids are on there, mums, daughters, people like that. You need to protect your customers and the people from, unfortunately, that tiny percentage that hide behind a screen and, you know, just want to pull people down.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I could not agree more. I think one thing that happens when you get a pseudo expert, somebody that knows what they do, they don't really know where to begin. And the important thing to know, which I've learned only in the last few years since I've been involved with Get Hooked on Fishing, where we have people from like 2 years old sitting on their dad's lap. And you want to know, first of all, what the person that's asking you the question wants to get out of fishing. And when you see on some of these very basic pleasure angling groups, somebody that has caught 100 pounds of carp by some nefarious means, you know, one of those days when they jump on the bank,
hang themselves,
then they start giving us, oh, well, what I do, I use a method feeder cast up to the island. Well, first of all, the person should be starting fishing very basically, and the first thing they do shouldn't be a method feeder. And it's what does that person want to get out on fishing? Most people, when they first start fishing, are very, very happy catching a 5-inch roach or perch. Or whatever. They're the squeals we get off kids and their mums, and they want to take photos of it. And then you see some other let's start fishing groups where the kids are allowed to sit next to the rod, and when the alarm goes off, Dad will help them wind it in and then help them hold the fish, the 8-pound carp, so Mum can take a picture. Now, you know, that, in my mind, isn't how to start something. I'll give you an example. On Reading and District Angling Club, Angling Association's Facebook group, somebody posted the other day, took my boy fishing today. He had a great time. He used one of my old ledger rods and a little float, and he caught over 100 fish. I think I should get him a whip. So I said, well, why do you want to get him a whip? He said 100 fish on a rod and reel. He's going to learn much more about the sport, fishing with a rod and reel, than he is with a whip. And gradually, not gradually, this bloke came around instantly. There was still loads. Oh, I've got a 4 metre midi margin master crunchy up your bollocks thing that you can have. You know, one of these Yankum Bank shock stick. I know Yankum Bank style, and they're shocking names, shocking names to give pieces of fishing equipment. Really are terrible names, and that isn't what most people who go fishing have any interest in at all. That little boy who was 9 caught over 100 fish while his dad sat behind 3 rods that didn't move.
Yeah.
If you were a 9-year-old kid, what would you rather do?
I'd probably be sat in there getting them little Rudd and Roach for sure. I'm like that now. Never mind as a kid.
There you go. And so are most people. We've got two kinds of... Our lakes, get on fishing lakes, the ponds are tiny. There's 6 ponds in about 2 acres, so they're tiny, tiny. Probably the biggest one is, I don't know, 50 metres by 40, something like that. And we sell more tickets for 2 rods to carp anglers than we do to people that want to catch anything else. I'll go over there in an hour and a half. I'll have 25 roach up to 12 ounces fishing empentairs. And I don't fish for any longer because, why do I want to catch another 25 roach on empentairs? I've already caught loads of them. So, but we get youngsters over there, give them a maggot, they catch a little perch. Oh, lovely. Put a pellet on, they catch one of our new little tiny carp that we've got about 5 inches long. And they have a great time. And then they see the carp swimming around. Not many of them, but they see these that people can't catch. And that's what inspires them to want to catch those big carp, like it did me. I caught my first carp age 23, and I caught it out the Thames fishing for days.
But that pulled you around.
Well, it did. It was £1.25. But you didn't catch many £1.25 fish on the tidal in those days, using a 14-foot rod and a centre pin and a crow quill.
No.
It's just important to have somewhere to go, isn't it? If you start with that £10 carp, then what you're doing? It's like, I was probably... We used to fish on club waters, which... don't get me and Dave started. We know all the same club waters. So...
Tanner's Dam by any chance?
Yes, Tanner's Dam was one of them, like just full of roach, perch, and if you caught a pound skimmer, you was chuffed a bit. And if we had a day out in the holidays to a commercial, that was a day out. And that was like literally sleepless night, couldn't wait, but it was a treat.
Yeah,
we caught like a 2 or 3 pound carp, and then that was it. That was it. We were back on the club water, which was local, fishing for roach and perch. And I was once I'd left university in my early 20s before I started fishing commercials regularly, and it just feels like you've got to have somewhere to go, otherwise you're going to go. Just imagine catching a 15-pound carp to start with, and then you catch a 5-pounder, and all of a sudden you're turning your nose up at. That's not right, is it? A 5-pound carp should be, when you're a young'un, that should be a big fish. That should be excitement, and it shouldn't just come on a plate.
If I looked at the emails I used to get to Tight Lines, the most popular one, if you refined it down, it would be, I'm very experienced carp angler. I've caught them up to 25 pound. Where do I go to catch, and how do I catch a 30-pounder? John, aged 15, Kent.
Yeah.
And I would reply very, very politely. And Dave, I replied to every email, whether they came in onto the show or whether they came to me, I'd reply to them all. And I just replied, when you're experienced enough to catch a 30-pound carp, probably the last person you'll want to ask is me.
Yeah, that's one typical answer as well for me. Very good. The thing is, I think this all comes round to the point that I'm started with about, have we got too much information? Because it's about immediacy, isn't it? You've got information, angling media at your fingertips, whether it be YouTube, whether it be somebody's Facebook page, whether it be Instagram or whatever, and a cacophony of sort of legacy stuff. In fact, that you're just talking about, Keith, the kid catching on a worm down the canal, that was a Clean River production, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It cropped up on YouTube the other day. And that was from 1980, whatever. So you can pull all this content from years and years. It's right at your fingertips. So sometimes it does make me wonder a little bit about everything that you guys have just said about the immediacy of, I want this now. I can get the information straight away. So I want to be able to go out tomorrow and catch a 20-pound carp. And that just doesn't work. And I guess this is back to my whole point, is that I do think, because of the source, because of the provenance of this info, like Alex has said, check your source where it's coming from. I do worry that if somebody looks at the wrong thing, the wrong bit of information, and that 10-pound barbel doesn't get landed tomorrow because they saw it, somebody do it online, will that ultimately then put people off because they've gone about it the wrong sort of way?
The beauty in the past is obviously whether it was improving coarse fishing before the digital era really boomed, whether it was improving coarse fishing or whether it was tight lines, you had a filter which it had an authority with it. If you're reading it or picking it up, that it's got an authority. It's coming from people that know what they're talking about. Now, as you say, if you go online, if you're watching something that, let's say, Guru or Preston have done, it's got an authority.
Yes, credibility.
If you're watching YouTube and it's Joe Blogs, well, he may sound like he knows what he's doing, but he may not. So
it sounds like my YouTube channel, Tony.
And it's kind of, I nearly said it could be Dave Eastwood, but I didn't. I said Joe Blogs instead, so I held back. But that is the problem with it. Like I said, there's lots of information, genuine information that's good, is great. But, if it isn't swearing, it isn't naughty, it stays on the internet, which is fine, but that can have an adverse effect, as the lads have been saying, because you could be picking some absolute duff information from someone who can just talk well. Nigel Farage talks well. Doesn't mean he talks sense. So, it's just...
Or even the truth.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. But let's not get started on that.
No politics or religion, please, gents. Well, Alex, actually, it's quite funny because you started, we spoke about this on your podcast, during lockdown, all the rest of it. You started your own little YouTube channel. It was really popular as well. How did you find the feedback for that? Was it, I think it was generally, quite positive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was all quite good. The hard thing to portray on YouTube or any sort of self-led media is that the foremost reason of producing, say, a media, whether you're involved with a company or whatever, is promotion, isn't it? It's promote yourself, promote a product, show,
promote the sport, promote anything. Yeah.
So if, say, for me, the struggle I had with it, it's hard to stay showing things genuinely. So, for instance, let's talk about pellet fishing on a commercial, because it's something I can relate to. Sometimes you'll drop in, and because it's that first bit of bait, the fish you might foul up your first two fish until your peg settles down. And you almost don't want to show that footage because of, you might get Fred who thinks, oh, what's he playing at? I can do better than that. I don't foul up my first fish. Drops a comment on you and, ripping his pieces. When really it's quite a natural process. It's hard to show that progression of your peg without showing the negative points as well, which for me, sort of a bit further on in my angling, I want to see, I don't know, let's pick a name, Steve Ringer, when it goes wrong, the decision he makes, but etc., to then progress from that. Whereas as a media outlet, you want to portray your products, your anglers, in the best possible light. You don't want to show them losing a fish, foul looking a fish, snapping a bristle off a float when a fish snags him in the edge, any of that sort of thing. But I was quite keen with mine to keep it genuine, so I tried to leave it in when I had a bad cast, unwinding it and say, look, you have an odd bad cast, if you hit the island, it's one of them things, work through it. Because
I insisted on that on Tight Lines, by the way, even when we edited the whole day's filming down to 8 or 9 minutes. If I dropped a proper one, then I would insist it was left in just to show it is possible to make mistakes. But
it also makes it relatable as well, doesn't it, for your listener, your viewer?
The other thing I think with a lot of videos, and when Dave first started doing his, we had several conversations about it. And because I've always worked with producers, or I've been the producer, or I've been the director, I've seen it from all sides. And whilst I know I'm not always right on these kind of things, less is definitely more. And it's very difficult, as I said earlier, to keep the attention for an hour. And if you can encapsulate that hour in 10 minutes, I've just had 50 minutes and I've only had one little bite on that. And Dave does some nice edits now, and edits are very important, and really going out with a storyboard of what you want to do.
Yeah. It took me ages to learn it.
Yeah. And when you go to someone like Lindholm, it is relatively easy to do a storyboard because you're not going to be fishing for dace and be pestered by barbel.
Yes,
sounds terrible.
That'd be a nice day out.
You know what I mean? I mean, you're going to fish for F1s, and for example, and you might get more carp than you expect, and you can then, this is a real bonus. I'm doing everything right for F1s, and I've had a few, but I've done it so right, the carp are coming and bullying them off. And now, look, I'm getting a 6-pounder every cast instead of a 12-ounce. That kind of thing is easy to do. But the most important thing about creating any kind of broadcast entertainment is objective. And while you're making it, it's subjective, but it's got to work towards the objective at the end. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to show someone how to catch a 100-pounder carp in a match, shallow on the pole. I'm trying to show someone how to catch tricky F1s in the winter by using little baits down the edge or whatever. But have that objective and then create a storyboard. We used to call it a treatment, where you write down everything you're going to do. And that's how I do a show. I do it now. I write just bullet points, odd words. I don't write sentences, I'm going to say, because you read them, you mess up. So, yeah, but that can be really important, because when I see some of the productions of less able anglers, and when you see them, really struggling, I don't know why I'm not catching anything today. I've done all this right. It's shocking. But they're still there. But, that's my view. That's my opinion. And broadcasting, like everything else, is an imperfect science. But, I think if you get an objective and can then work towards it, you will definitely get better results.
I think the problem with yours, though, Alex, was you were like you had time constraints. A lot of your videos was done of an evening. And
it's all it's same as anything. You get out what you put into it.
Correct.
I'm trying to work 4 days for a fishery, do my coaching, be competitive in my own fishing, and something's got to give somewhere. And obviously, for me at the minute, I'm 26 years old, trying to buy a house, try to do this, that, and the other. I thought, right, that's got to give.
Yeah.
And that's life. That'll, not just in fishing, it's anything you pursue in life.
I had exactly the same with fishing. I mean, I virtually had to stop match fishing in the end. All I could get to was Gold Valley on a Saturday. If the match didn't start until 10, I could just about get there. And I couldn't go anywhere else. I couldn't get there in time, couldn't fish nationals anymore, couldn't do any of that. But it was I was earning really good money doing it, which was okay. I didn't need any more money. I had enough money already. But what I wanted to do was I felt that I'd got so much out of fishing in all those years. It was only fair that I could do as much as I could to put some back, even if it meant my own fishing that I really love, match fishing. I mean, I think just catching fish is too easy. Me against the fish is just not fair. But me against you against the fish, or me against Dave against the fish, or Bob Nudd or anyone else is a very different matter. And that's where you have to really get clued up. So I had to sort of drop all that to do for what I wanted to get out of it aesthetically. And during the complete opposite situation, you need as much money as you can possibly get as soon as possible. And you've got to cater your fishing to that way. But what you must do, first of all, is be true to your own match fishing, because that's what keeps you in a job at Lindholm. It's what encourages people to come to you for coaching. And while YouTube videos are very good and all the rest of it, there's loads and loads of others on there. But if you can get stuff by word of mouth as well, then, you're going down the right road, mate.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I learned that lesson a little bit last year. You almost suffer from like a burnout if you try to split yourself too many ways. And so I sort of said this year to myself, right, I need to fish X, Y, Z. So that's in the diary, and everything else can work around that. Because obviously the coaching is a results-driven business. If I'm not competitive, I'm not doing well, I'm not representing my sponsors, everything sort of, it's a rapid decline, isn't it?
And you know what the worst thing of all, and you have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to not want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to work today. I really don't want to get out of bed to go. I don't want to go to that match today. It's going to be shit. It's going to be windy. It's going to be rain. As soon as you get that, you're in serious trouble. Serious trouble. You've got to enjoy what you're doing. And I've always been lucky. And when I've really got fed up with doing a job I didn't want to do, something has come along that's enabled me to stop doing it. And another door has opened for me. And Dave knows this. I've always said yes. Somebody says, can you do it? Yes, I'll do it. If it's humanly possible, I will do it. It's much more difficult for me now because I've got a domestic situation that makes it much more difficult for me to say yes and to be anywhere else other than here. So but that's something entirely different. But if somebody said, "Oh, can you do this?" Yes. When would I do tight lines for nothing? Of course, I'd do it for nothing. My manager, Barry Hearn, wouldn't let me do it for nothing. He wanted me to earn 125 grand a year from tight lines. So, and because he wanted the commission off it. So, it was that kind of things. I would, if they'd have said to me, "Look, Keith, we've got to stop tight lines because we're paying you too much money," I'd say I'd do it for a year for nothing. And I would genuinely have done it. They could have paid me expenses, but I would genuinely have worked for a year for nothing.
Don't give Neil any ideas at Lindholm.
Yeah, you'll see me outside Co-op next week.
Yeah, don't give Neil any ideas. They'll be saying, Alex,
I'll be there in my cardboard box.
Yeah. But that'll never happen with you, Alex, because and it would never happen with me either, because Sky didn't stop doing tight lines because they were paying me too much money. They stopped because they wanted to stop live productions in the building because they were spending too much money on all of them, not just me. 17 people it took to get tight lines on air, and all earning a load of money. So that's why that had to stop, along with all the other magazines they used to do in-house, the live stuff. Soccer AM is about the only one that survived. But it was, you mustn't ever undervalue yourself. And I'd had 19 years and 11 months on tight lines, earning a lot of money. So it was very easy for me to say, I'll do it for a year for nothing. But, but you will do. And I don't think, I might have met you on a fish show up there. I don't know. But you will do much, much more on every branch of your business, I'm Alex Dockerty, I'm doing this. At Lindholm, I'm Alex Dockerty, I'm doing this coaching, I'm Alex Dockerty, I'm doing these YouTubes. You will do miles more than you're paid for. I know that because you love doing it.
Oh yeah, you have it all the time at Fishery. You end up, you do your last checks 4 o'clock, you end up still with about till 6:30, saying, right, pop this in, have a go at this, chuck this like that.
Yeah.
You sit there and think, hang on, I've just worked 2 hours for free. And they think, I'm chatting about fishing, it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And that bloke will tell his mates, and his mates will say, well, that's great, I'll go and do that. And while you're packing up at 4 o'clock, he stayed until 6:30.
Yeah. Speaking of a great job, though, Tony, we spoke about this before. I think you've got the best job in the world. However, I do think you've got a hell of a lot of responsibility, because you've got to take somebody's messaging or style or that day's angling and put it into words in a way that is credible, as we've said before, is retainable by the reader, and is in some elements memorable as well. So I think it's incumbent on you quite a lot of responsibility in some respects. How long have you done it now? You have told me before, I forgot.
15 years in a couple of months. Like literally my first ever proper job. Left uni, thought with a journalism degree, oh wow, it'd be amazing to work for the angling press when my career ends. This was when, print press was a bit stronger than it is now. And then sent off a couple of emails and got lucky pretty much. And started at AT in 2007 and now mainly on Improve, 15 years on. But it comes down to just practice. It comes down to, like with anything, like experience. I mean, I'm sure Keith found his early shows of tight lines a lot harder than he did with the later shows, because you learn a style, you learn the best way of delivery, you learn what becomes entertaining, you learn what becomes genuine.
I was carrying Bruno Brooks on my shoulders.
you just get used to it, and you find the best way to get the message across. You try and get a bit of, in print, you try and get a bit of that person's. It's harder with print than it is with audio. Try and get that bit of that person's personality across. Yeah. The quotes that are in the magazine, a lot of them aren't word for word quotes, because a lot of them's in conversation, but all the information is what the angler would do. It's not just twisted just for the sake of things. It's what the angler would do. Yeah. That's where I'm at with it. Really, it's just experience helps a lot to get it across. Definitely.
Yeah. When I first, I wrote a piece for Match Fishing for Tom and Matt a few years ago, and coming from a university background, it was so hard to write in a style to entertain rather than a style like, I don't know, like an essay style. And I had some time. Obviously, it took forever to rewrite and reproduce. And I'm thinking, but it's same as anything. It's like the more you do it, the more natural it comes.
Definitely.
Imagine doing that longhand like I had to when I started, writing it on
the stone
lined
tablets,
lighting it on ruled paper.
Stone tablets, did you hear that?
Yeah.
You missed Alex's quip. He said, was you writing it on a stone tablet?
Yeah, almost, yeah. I had a reporter's notebook, and I used to write my articles on that in longhand, fold them up, put them in an envelope and post them. That's what I had to do. And then eventually...
years your column been in, Keith? You did say it on the last episode.
First one was in David Hall's Coarse Fishing magazine in 1979, I think, something like that.
And Angling Times?
Angling Times 1990 I started.
So not quite stone tablet, Alex, but it could have been a chalkboard.
By 1990, I had... I did used to send copy to Angling Times longhand, but then I got an Amstrad
CPC 464.
No, PC 9256 word processor.
You remember these things, you say?
Oh, mate, I've got an iMac in front of me and a printer next to it, and the 9256, which had 256 kilobytes of memory, was bigger than these two things.
Yeah.
And everything had to be on a floppy disk.
So you were sending that off weekly to...
Post a floppy disk, to Angling Times, to Peterborough. Well, some of the stuff I was doing then, don't forget we were doing on the bank. Some of the how-tos I was doing with Michelle Daniel and Kev Green, and we'd actually be doing them on the bank. Dave Woodman's here a few times. We'd be doing them literally. They would be writing the words and I'd be providing the other stuff. But when I was writing my own column, which happened every so often, by eventually I had I bought a power book, an old Mac power book.
Yes.
That I started about the mid-90s. I started doing that. Then I got, went through, got an iMac. And
imagine writing up all your features longhand.
If I had to supply written copy, I'd never have a career, because people look at my my notepad and go, doing shorthand. It's like, just nod, and that's just terrible handwriting. Shocking handwriting.
Yeah, it was quite difficult. And the other thing as well, I think that the quality was much lower than it is today, because if I made a mistake or wanted to put one paragraph in another place, it meant rewriting the whole bloody lot.
Yeah.
So, you wouldn't do it. But now I can think of a paragraph 4 or 5 paragraphs further on than I actually want to write it. Type it in there and then, and just copy and cut it.
No, so I was going to say, I usually write 3 or 4 intros. Like the first part, the first 50 words, I usually write 3 or 4. That's always the hardest bit for me, just to get something, because obviously you're writing 10 features in a magazine. Yeah, they've all got to sound different. And,
exactly. Yeah,
and like you say, if you've written that if you've penned that, then that's, like as you said, your flexibility is greatly reduced. Other than, as you said,
I'm quite lucky because I write stuff in my head. Like I will, I don't know. Most of you know my wife's got a pony, and I go down 5 days a week and feed it and pick the shit up. And I write plenty of paragraphs and ideas walking around that field. If you were to if you gave me a title for an article or for a feature and said, I want 300, 500, 700, 900, 1,500 words, 3,000 words, I could do it like that. Just give me a title. It's when I can't think of a title that's the hard part. I mean, I used to write every week when I did Fisherman's Blues on the radio, 2 shows. I used to write a poem for the start of each show. I've got memory discs of them here. I've probably still got them all. Some of them I remember, one called Purple Poo that I wrote about what happens in October when all the elderberries and everything out, and everything eats elderberries and blackberries, and there's purple shit everywhere you look. Yeah. And that was quite an evocative one. And some of them were funny. Some I used to love writing a limerick. Used to love a limerick and create the innuendo by having the last line not rhyme.
Very good. I was thinking with this, I did the rattling of the paper before. I only ever, for any of these podcasts, and it's like, whatever, 20 now, 21, I only ever took notes for the first 2. That was with yourself, Keith and Tom. And it was just to get me going. After that, I never had any notes. I had all the research was in my head. and I knew the structure of how I wanted that conversation to go. The only time I've wrote notes since is today for this, because it's the very first one where there's more than one person. So I've over time, I've got a bit like that. I guess, I mean, my professional life, I work in training, learning and development. So I'm pretty lucky in the respect that I sort of haven't, back to that term we used before, I have an objective at the start of what I want the listener to get out of at the end of it. A bit like training. The start of the session, you'll say, right, what do you want to get out of this? And then you'll build your session in your mind as you go through the content. And it's a little bit similar with a podcast, or whether it's a video that I've done, or I used to really enjoy writing. When back in the day when I did blogs, probably 12, 13 years ago, and it was all written. Writing out a session on a blog took hours and hours, but I used to really enjoy it and adding the odd image to it. So probably similar to, you know, how you started doing your journal degree, Tony, when you started constructing almost like the story. So I get what you mean, Keith, about not having to, you just have to go for a walk, and these storyboards pop in my head now. I know how I want a feature to sort of unfold. Oh, it's funny though, because I'm fine. We'll come on to the final subject now. I recorded my first live match the other week. I only did it because I'd treated myself to a camera that I knew I could get a good 3 hours worth of battery life out of. You're having to switch it on and off, and it's not ideal filming yourself fish a match, but I knew it was going to be a slow day. It was heavy frost, all the rest of it. And when I edited and put everything together, I didn't realise how much I look around, how much I watch other people, what's going on. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I should be watching my flow, I should be watching my tip. I'm watching what's going on all the time. I never realised that. So that's my final conversation piece for, is about live recording or looking back or viewing content. Tony, tell me about, give me an example. I know you told me some examples in the past about like where a feature's turned into a bit of a disaster. So bit of light-hearted, don't give away, you know, don't embarrass anybody, but can you give any examples of where the day's just gone completely Pete Tong?
Oh yeah, I mean, you turn up and, you know, fish don't bite, you catch nothing. I remember once we went to a fishery and we couldn't catch this big bream, and the owner caught one, and it was like, well, we know they're in it, so we need a picture of this. So he says, can we use that bream? And he says, well, only if you drag it through the water in a keep net, as opposed to walking it 50 metres in a landing net. I was like, okay. He forgot to tell me that the margins, right, I was walking through were about 5 foot deep. And I'm walking through these margins with this bream in the water to get this picture. I mean, to walk 50 metres. That was chaotic. But, weather. I've been to wrong stretches of river trying to find people.
What 3 words? Now you got what 3 words? That never happens.
I know there'd be none of that. There'd be none of it anymore, would there? There was none of those joys in the past.
This is the swim you want to be in. Snot, slimy, poo.
Yeah, we can really give people spots away now to the blade of grass, pretty much, if we wanted
exactly,
to. Yeah. We could really annoy people if they got up our noses. I mean, like I say, 95% of the time it goes right. But I always say, because within Biomedia, which owns the magazines, they own golf magazines, gardening. If they go out and do a feature, that feature gets done. Now, within fishing, yes, 95% of the time it will, but 5% of the time, or hopefully less, if the fish don't want to open their mouths, you don't get a feature. It's as simple as that. And a lot of the time, the more exciting features, the ones that have that, you know, that maybe that interest, where even if you wouldn't do that style of fishing, are the ones where you go and do something that's a little bit more different. I mean, today I've been on the Tiverton Canal in Devon, and the blokes had 6 tench to 6 pound. And it was
did that with Kim Wilson.
Phenomenal canal. I've never been on it. We were talking about Kim today. Bizarrely, we were talking about him. And just a phenomenal canal. And, you know, he said, you just don't hear about that sort of fishing. Could have gone wrong. He said, we should catch a tench, and he ended up catching 6. Now, it's one of those features which, when I look at it, hopefully, when I look back at the pictures, it should look lovely and something totally different, something that you don't see every day. Yeah, it's one of those which is a little bit of a gamble. You know, it's not going fishing shallow for F1s where you know you're going to catch 30 pound of F1s, even on a terrible day at this time of year on a feature. So yeah, it definitely goes wrong at times, but it's worth those gambles because when they come off, like I say, for those, just a bit more special fish, they, it gets the creative juices running that bit more with the camera and stuff like that.
No golf journo has ever been out with Ian Poulter and someone's been in front of him and filled all the holes in.
Exactly that. That's it. There is that element of what if, particularly, when you go in winter, or if you, like you say, if you're going for a particularly sort of elusive fish, I think what's like a double bar, river fishing, for example. You just can't plan on rivers particularly because, what's it going to be like on the opening day? Clear. We're going to have some sudden deluge of rain. You just can't plan it.
By the way, what happens here, whoever says what, I will top it.
Well, I'm leaving you to last.
No, because I will. I might not even have to play my trump card, but I will top it.
You're going to be last anyway, because I know that you don't work in the angling media for X amount of years and not have a ton of bloopers. But Alex, you must have had a disaster on a feature, on a vid, or even I know you've got tons of funny stories we were going to talk about last time that you've seen around the fishery, but give us an example.
In terms of features, probably nothing too sort of drastic, just like I'd gone on Loco one day, and for those that you don't know it's sort of a deep lake, 8-10 foot deep, and it's sort of like a feeder fishing at range thing. I'm sat there, I've been sat there, and we've got to like 11, 12 o'clock. Bear in mind this is winter, so by half two, the light's gone and the picture's going to look horrendous.
Yeah.
I'm sat there, it's got to like 12, I'm like, don't think this is happening, mate. So then it's like, just right, we'll launch everything in the van and run round to one of the other lakes and, scramble something together. And then other than that, with sort of films, what I found when I watch myself back, you sometimes get stuck on a word. So like you'll use it in every sentence. You sit there and you watch it, you think, why really sound like that? And like I'll be into a word like, I don't know, superb, and that word will crop word 40 times in 10 minutes on a video or something.
Keith had me straight away when I was like smacking my lips, didn't you? Remember the first video? You was like, "Why do you keep smacking it? Oh, what do you mean?"
Well, I did it.
It was like
one of our assistant producers had to push me. Lovely Bobby Gould, who when he used to take over from me at Talk Sport sometimes when he did a breakfast show with Mike Parry. Listen to him on a football match, he will say incredulous
instead of incredible.
Instead of incredible.
Unbelievable, Jeff.
Yeah, he will say incredulous. That was an incredulous pass.
Yeah, in training we call it a hook word. So when you're, let's say that they essentially, you ask them to do a presentation or a demo or something like that, and you're perhaps listening in and ready to feed back, you'll pick up on these hook words. I had one, it was absolutely. You say absolutely all the time. But once you have it identified to you pretty much get over it. What was your word, Alex? You remember?
I can't remember what it is now. Aaron would tell you. If you ever see Aaron, he likes to remind me regularly of things.
I'll tell you a popular one. It wasn't basically, was it?
No, I don't think so. It might have been ridiculous or something like that.
People say basically all the time. It's a hook word.
The last time Alex and I were out for the magazine, he sort of took a curveball. We were fishing down the margins, and where were we on beaches, Alex? And I said that you're right on margin. It was winter margin fishing. It had a big bush, and you thought that looks bang on to catch down the edge. On the left hand margin, it had a bit of grass, and it looked like nothing to me. And then I said to Alex, "Have you caught all your fish?" Went every bite on the left, and you're like, I think we were trying to catch a fish down the right, weren't we? You could not get a bite.
The picture would have been a lot better to her, right? But
couldn't get a bite, literally for love no money. And I think you messaged me after you'd gone. You said I think you eventually caught one or something down the right, and you think you're so determined because it looks so sock on, and the other one just looks so nondescript.
The shoal of F1's under a blade of grass.
It just, I'm stood over this margin, and you think how you're still getting bites. Yet this tree with plenty of cover, and you think can't get a bite. It's just one of those curveballs.
Tons of stuff. Right, Keith. Finish us off with whatever you're going to pick. I don't care. I know you're going to have something decent. I know you have.
Well, I was filming with a bloke called Mick Toomer for Pedigree Films, Clean River Fishing, and we were going mid-channel wrecking with, at the time, the very best, most famous boat out of Weymouth.
Was that Mick Toomer who used to have Gloucester Park and that?
Yes. that Mick Toomer. Mick, who knew absolutely everything.
Yes.
Lovely bloke, but his opinions were right, and usually they were. So we've gone out with this brilliant angler. We've got a little dinghy we're taking with us because we've got 2 cameras. So we're going to be on the main boat, and camera 2 is going to be on this little dinghy, which was, like a Park Lake rowing boat. So out we've gone 37 miles into the English Channel with big boats going backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
We've got out there. We found the wreck, 200 feet of water. We've got young Brian out on the camera boat. We've had our first drift. Mick's hooked the wreck, pulled. And this is the days, and this is not braid and a nice 10-ounce slow jig. This is like a 1.5 pound perk and 40-pound line and a rod like a broomstick. So Mick's hooked this wreck, and we pulled for the brake. Got the brake. So Paul said, "I'll just run us back up the tide." Started the motor and it caught fire.
Oh, no.
So there is smoke coming out of the middle of the boat, 37 miles out from Weymouth, in a shipping lane.
Yes. And you're drifting.
And he's the captain was a volunteer member of the lifeboat crew. So the last thing he wanted to do was phone the lifeboat. So he identified what was wrong, phoned his missus got his missus on the ship to shore radio. There probably were mobile phones. This would have been the very early 1990s, 93, something like that, maybe even earlier than that. And he somehow got his missus on the radio. She phoned, and the only place they had this part was in Southampton. So she would have to drive to Southampton, get this part, get another skipper to bring it out, by which time it would have been in the middle of the night. So he's tried everything he knows to get the boat working again, and there's still smoke coming out of it. He's put the fire extinguisher on it, so the fire's out. So it was the starter motor had burnt out. And it's getting rougher and rougher. It's too deep to drop the anchor, and we're in a shipping lane. So we're drifting along. The waves are getting higher and higher. The rope and we've got Brian back on board, luckily, because the rope snapped. And they recovered this little tender 3 days later, the other side of the Isle of Wight. Right? And we'd left the hotel at 6:40 in the morning. We were out at 7 o'clock. Ultimately, he had to call the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard called the lifeboat. The lifeboat, which was a 54-foot lock-in, I'll never forget it, because the boat that we were on was a 33-foot lock-in, the same make. The lifeboat came out, had to tow us back to Weymouth at 6 knots. We got back at 11:10 in the evening when everything was shut. We couldn't get a snack. We couldn't get anything. I mean, in those days, everything shut, and we couldn't get anything. And I'd not even dropped a line in the water. Mick had hooked the wreck once. And that was it. That was, and it was, I mean, yeah, I laugh about it now. I wasn't laughing about it at the time because for a start, it was quite lumpy. We're being towed nearly 100 yards behind a lifeboat. And while we were still drifting, this big old Belgian beam trawler, which I'll never forget. I know it was Belgian because it's, they all have a letter code on them and a number. The letter code was 00, which is Ostend, and the number was 56, and it was bearing down on us. We couldn't move, and that wasn't moving at all. It wasn't towing, it was running. And when it eventually went past us and our boat went under its beam, like it went under its, what do they call them, the outrigger, we actually went under the outrigger of the boat with the nets dripping on us. Oh, God. They had a rope around the wheel to keep it on course, and they were probably downstairs having a cup of tea or a glass of wine, being Belgian. And it was a really terrifying day. One of the great South Coast skippers, very famous. I think he's still around. He still has a Facebook page, and he might. I'm seeing about for a couple of years, but that was more or less a disaster, as well as the lake in Ireland we went to that Ian Heeks recommended us to. Didn't have any fishing.
You said yes. You told us about.
There's not many of those.
Sure. Yeah.
So and this was the first video I've ever made.
Yes.
And we actually left the lake with more fish in it than when we got there.
Brilliant.
Because Mark Downs and Darren Davis went down the road and caught a bucket full of bream and I caught them.
Oh, God. Well, I don't think you're going to have any issues like that at Lindholm, Alex. You're not going to be drifting across
there, I think, Annie.
That was, and it's one of, I'm very bad with dates, but I'll never forget that date because it was the day before the Hillsborough tragedy.
Ah, yes. Yeah. There was one, we did the podcast with Robson Green, and he's obviously been all over the place, travelled the world for these fishing programs. And there was one, he gave a story. If the listeners have not listened to that, well worth the listen. He talks about a terrifying experience, stuck in ridiculous hurricane conditions. And basically he must have prayed to God numerous times, where they were just sort of drifting and couldn't do. You're at the mercy of the elements.
Yeah.
So, there's some. So it's a cruel mistress, is the sea. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's about it, chaps. Thank you so much for your time. And Alex, you're off. Where are you off tomorrow? I know you're going away early.
Where am I tomorrow? Western tomorrow for Fishermania. So fingers crossed for a nice one tomorrow, mate.
Good luck, mate. See you July the 23rd.
Good luck.
Hopefully.
Speaking of which, that's the one, Keith. So you will be there, Fishermania final.
All things being equal, yeah, I've been asked again.
Good man, top man.
Never mind what Nolly Goforth says.
We won't get into that.
No, I won't anyway.
No, Tony, you got featured tomorrow, or are you writing?
No, well, the kids have got chicken pox, so I'm sat at home on daddy daycare for the next 3 days now. So
that was me 3 weeks ago.
So that's fun. I'm currently trying to find socks that fit on their hands and rubbing lotion into their faces and necks, and it's absolute chaos. So yeah, I was on the Tiverton Canal today, and I was at Crawford Vineyard / Crawford Lakes yesterday. So that's me off the bank for this week. I was going to say to you, Dave, actually, did you actually do this one today because your feature is on the front of Angling Times of this week? Is that why you've sneaked this one in?
No, not at all. No,
no.
It was hard enough to coordinate three of yous anyway. So no, that was just pure luck. So no, you are right. Angling Times today, just so the listeners know. Do pick up a copy. I'm in there. And Improve Your Course Fishing next month, which will be available early June. So nice plug. Thanks, Tone.
Yes, nice. Nicely done.
Excellent. Thank you very much, chaps. It's been a pleasure, and we'll all catch up soon again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. See you guys. Well done.
For all your fishing needs, be sure to check out Fishing Evolution. Boasting 2 floors of branded displays, visit our recently expanded superstore at Hadley Road in Sleaford, where we offer a huge range of tackle from all of the leading coarse and carp brands, such as Nash, Fox, Corda, Drennan, Preston, Guru, Daiwa, and many, many more. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where we share all of the latest news and updates about products available in store.
Well, it's been a while since we delved into our metaphorical tackle shed and looked at some of the gear that's available lately, and it seems non-stop right now. And it seems that all the major tackle companies have had some sort of release, whether it be rods, whether it be terminal tackle, clothing, etc. And I guess that's just the nature of the beast as we move now through the seasons. It's not a case that there's 1 or 2 launches per year. It's actually that these tackle companies are releasing, reacting to the change of seasonality for fishing. So as we go into summer, I know that Matrix have just done a big release of various clothing, new t-shirts, shorts, things like that, but also more around substantial pieces of kit. High price items would be the best way to call it. So we'll look into the weeklies. In Angling Times this week, they've got a section in the tackle guide, 10 great pellet waggler rods for £100 or less. And again, this seasonality piece. Now, as the water's warming and the fish are rising towards the surface, for those fishing commercial venues, and actually a lot of venues where shallow fishing comes to the fore, a pellet waggler rod is a versatile piece of kit anyway. You don't have to fish a pellet waggler on there, but they're made for that type of fishing. Angling Times are reacting to that. And these go from everything from, I've mentioned before, my leader concept of a GT rod, I've a 13-foot one that I use for waggler fishing. I think it cost me like 40 quid. And that's the same price point for their 2-piece rods, which come in 10, 11 and 12 foot. So those are budget conscious. It's in there. And it even says, cheap as chips, surprisingly good performers. We would challenge even a seasoned expert to pick fault with this range given the budget price. Up to £100, the likes of your Guru N-gauge pellet waggler rods. Midi's got their 5G, Preston's of the Monster X, etc. So if you're in the market for a new pellet waggler, because it is that time of the year, then there is a wide variety available at a reasonable price point. Now, just one range that I want to highlight. I actually bought one just because of the price point. It wasn't a pellet waggler rod, but it's this range by Daiwa. It's called the Matchman range. And these are between £45 and £50. Pellet waggler wise, they're doing a 10, 11, 12, and even a 13-foot, all for £49.99. I went for the 9-foot method feeder rod, and that arrived this week. I've not had a chance to use it yet, but just picking the thing up, I can't believe it cost me £45, and I can't wait to get out on the bank and give that a go. I bought it really just because it's one of those I can whack in the hold all and it can come out when I need to. I have a little 8-foot picker, a wand type rod, but this is just that little bit more substantial. And for fishing a method down the margins, which I spoke about in the press pack, that feature that Alex does on Lindholm, it's a great tactic, and you just want that little bit of extra length just to poke it out along the rushes, along the inside, and to plop a little feeder or a bomb down there. So this range from Daiwa is one for me to highlight, because not only the pellet waggler rods, but the feeder range is very versatile too. Out the back of that, there's a selection, 8 of the best pellet wagglers available, from like soft, stubby floats that land without that big splash, through to the more traditional ones made from balsa or plastic, etc. So all sorts here, from Midi, from Daiwa, from Drennan, Preston's Precision ones as well, those little short, stumpy shorties from Drennan as well. So if you're in the market for a pellet waggler setup, have a little look at Angling Times this week, and that should give you some good ideas, because it's a tactic now that as that water's warming up, it's really going to come to the fore. It's a busy method. Don't forget, you've got to keep feeding. You've got to keep changing the depth. You've got to keep casting regularly as well. It's not a case of just firing a couple of pouches, casting over the top and hoping that, the rod gets ripped out of your hands. It just doesn't work that way. So have a little look in Angling Times this week, because it will give you a good heads up for pellet waggler fishing. Bit of a tried and tested piece for me, a purchase that I've made recently is, and I said I wouldn't do it on a previous podcast. I always said, all these hard case hold alls, I just don't see the point in them. I'm not ready to give up my traditional hold all with all the tubes, etc. Well, I did. I got tempted when I was in my local shop at Fishing Evolution, and I purchased the Matrix hard case. And in there, I read, it said, your pole and 30 top kits. I thought, surely not. Surely it's 30 top kits or your pole and 15 top kits as an example. But no, I have to say, inside my hold all, I don't have them all in there, but I managed to I fitted in 26 top kits. Not all the long short piece. I got 6 of them in. And then I think I got 20 top twos, which were folded over, as well as my pole, as well as my dolly boat extension as well as a landing handle and a cupping kit. So it's so much space saving, really easy to carry around. I'm not crashing it all over the house when I bring it in, and it's just a real good way of saving space. So yes, I went down that route. I've used it half a dozen times or so now. There are rumours that the zips leak on some of these hard cases. I've not been in the rain just yet, but what I will do is when it does rain, I'll just turn it over, make sure that my zip's not facing the rain. So that's a purchase that I've made. I sort of fell in with the crowd, if you like. That would be my tried and tested piece, but only tested on half a dozen occasions so far. And I mentioned earlier on, when we were speaking about Improve Your Coarse Fishing, that there are these new starter kits from Shakespeare. And I mentioned a classic brand. It really is. My first rod, which I borrowed off my brother, was a Shakespeare rod, 10 foot. It's a bit like a banana, to be fair, but I caught a few fish on it. And Tony, our friend, who we've just been speaking to in the forum, tests these 2 new kits from Shakespeare. They're called Challenge XC kits. There is a pole kit for $69.99 and a float kit for $99.99. And the idea is that it's an out-of-the-box setup that can get you fishing straight away and hopefully get you hooked on our sport forever. And Tony gives these a real good testing. It's well worth having a look at these. He puts them to the test. It's a live test. It's called the Shakespeare Challenge XC Kit, where he uses the pole, he uses the waggler setup and talks you through the benefits of them. There's also a video attached to this. You just scan the QR code on page 86 and you can see the video of Tony putting these kits through their paces. And when you think about that value, $69.99 for the pole setup. Now, that can get you up and running and fishing. It's got rigs included, it's got instructions to get you going straight away. But we did discuss on the forum that starting with a waggler would be better because that will give you more skills as you move forward in your angling development. But either or, it doesn't matter. Anything that gets somebody into fishing as a kickoff and whets the appetite, then, it's all more power to them, really. So have a look at that. If you're in the market maybe for a youngster or you're just starting out and you want to try pole fishing, you've not done that before, for a minimal outlay, that's one way to go. On to the new gear guide, and in Improve Your Coarse Fishing, there's a bit of something for everybody. I've just spoke about hard cases. This reviews the Preston hard case, similar price point to the Matrix one that I've just got. A nice little short feeder rod. I've just told you about the Daiwa one with Shimano. The Aero X1 is in that price range of £51.99. I said before about Shakespeare's specimen range, and that's its name. It's SKP. And on this feeder chair, wow, you could have a kip in that. No problem at all. It's got all the accessories that you need, side trays, ground bait trays, any accessories that you want to add on, you can stick onto this chair. The chair starts at $159.99. So for those with back issues, then this could be an option for you too. Okay, something I quite like in match fishing now. Page 54, you've got Tony Curd, who, for those that don't know, Southern-based angler, been in many big money finals, former map consultant, but now he's working for Match Fishing magazines. It's great. So you get somebody that's been involved with the tackle industry for a long time as a consultant, now coming into the angling media, and he's doing some reviews. And he tests out this Daiwa tournament feeder reel, 25 QD, claims it's the best reel ever. Now, bear in mind, this is a reel that's got an RRP of 435 quid. So this isn't a cheap piece of kit. This is high-end match tackle. And for somebody to say potentially the best reel that, he's ever used for big feeder fishing is impressive. So certainly not my end of the sky. I have got some high-end tackle items from back in the day, not recently. But I certainly don't spend that sort of money on reels, but I know people that do, and why not? If you can, if you can afford to get the best you can, great. But I like the fact that we've got Tony Curd doing these reviews now, which is great. On to the more generic section, which starts at, let me just find the page, is page 76, the new gear section. Bit of all sorts coming out. Some new elastics from Milo, new feeder S from Midi, some luggage from New Fish, but the bits and pieces that was one for me was, let's have a little look. It is, yes, Browning Silverlight landing net handle. Loads of landing net handles come out. You've had the Guru ones, the F1 and the 4 meter one. I believe that Drennan, Matrix will be coming out of a new one as well. And now we've got one from Browning. The idea is, it says a stiff landing net handle is just the job for silverfish angling, is made to the highest standards. Slender diameter means the handle flies through the hands when speed fishing, and lightweight makes it light in the hand for fatigue-free fishing when bites are coming thick and fast. 130 quid. But it's interesting to see a landing net has been put together for natural venues, for silverfish fishing. If you're on a drain, you're fishing a whip, something along those lines, then that, again, it's high-end, high-price point, but that will serve a need, I'm sure. There's a, big natural following, if you like. Another one, page 82, talking about reels from the Sublime down to the more budget conscious, from that Daiwa down to the latest Akuma. So this is the same XT match reel. Tony Curd again takes a look at it, gives it a nice review. It's something that's coming in at sort of £57. It looks a lot more high end than that. It looks a real smart piece of kit. But interesting part with Akuma, you'll see a lot of focus on that lately, because it's now distributed through Normark, same company as Dynamite Baits. So there's a lot more focus on trying to get the brand into the UK market. Akuma are a Taiwanese company, so it's not cheaper end of Far East Asia, shall we say. So really good piece of kit. Looks great for the price. It's the Seima XT, it's called. 4,000 and 3,000 sizes. The only thing that Tony does say is that he would love to see a 5,000 and 6,000 size as well. So that's a little bit from the magazines. What I did also do as well is ask our friends at Fishing Evolution here in Lincolnshire what has been selling well in store. So I got a bit of an overview broken down into two parts, really, sort of big ticket items and also day-to-day tackle. So big ticket items, they have to say that the Superium pole range, which has been launched with massive aplomb and fanfare, it's going down a treat. They have sold out pretty much of everything that they've had in stock, and orders are back on backlist. Also, the Wolf Mozzie Zapper. So the carp anglers are going for these little zappers to get rid of the mozzies. Absolutely. Of an evening when you're next to water, it can be terrible. So that sounds like a great purchase. And also, they said other big ticket items is the Daiwa Black Widow Unhooking Match is a great price point for fish care. Smaller items flying out the door. The whole new range of Sonia baits has been selling ridiculously well, the chaps have said. A number of floaters from various bait companies. So, as we said before about pellet waggler fishing, as the fish are moving up towards the surface layers, then these floating baits are coming in as well. And also another one, big seller, various companies, various brands, but polarized sunglasses. I've got a Matrix pair and I couldn't do without them from this time of year. Once that sun starts coming, and winter, and you've got those clear, crisp, sunny days in winter and the sun's really low, then a good pair of polarized specs as well. But for summer, they're an absolute must. One thing I'd say, just to wrap up the tackle shed piece, would be, I'd love if we could have your interaction. If you have come across an item of tackle that you've used, abused, and you think everybody else would benefit from something like that, then give us a shout. Drop us an email. You can message me through the Facebook page, or you can send me an email to eastwoodangling@gmail.com. So that's it. That is the end of this episode. It's been really interesting putting together the forum and having a number of anglers, like-minded people, talking about the angling media piece. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll get my thinking cap back on for the next episode, which will be available in another month or so. So thanks for listening, and tight lines.